Hello there and welcome, guys. Happy Tuesday. I'm glad we're all able to be back. It's been a while and I do apologize for that, but guess what? We're back now. So I couldn't be more excited to get right into our sip and our tip. For those of you all who are just joining me, I'm Gabrielle Victoria and this is a segment called Sip and Tip Tuesday. So every week I bring you guys a video that has some type of life hack, I like to call, but it's just tips on how to deal with everyday situations. And I throw in a twist when I have a drink, and I usually try and correlate the drink with the tip, but sometimes it's just a drink I like to have, okay? So go ahead and like, go ahead and share, go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already, but let's get right into it. So this week's sip is something I concocted. It's called a Volcano, and look how cute this glass is. Yes, okay. It's a volcano because guess what? This looks like a volcano and it's orange. So boom, we're gonna keep it simple. Oh, let me tell y'all what's in it. So it's guava nectar, Malibu coconut rum, because that's always the best, and pineapple ginger beer. If you guys have not ever had pineapple ginger beer, you can get it from your local Jamaican eatery, your local Caribbean store, but it is one of the best sodas of life. So I put that in here and let me tell you, it set it off. So cheers to this. It's a volcano. Try it at home. Promise you, you're gonna love it, all right? Now, for our tip of the week. This week is a little bit different. I know you guys are used to me just going straight into it with my tips, but I have a friend here, my iPad, and my iPad is actually going to help me because I have a tip that is just a little bit more complex than just rattling off what works for me. And I wanna make sure that I'm very careful not to miss over anything that's important. So this week's topic is dealing with difficult people, okay? We know difficult people, we've interacted with difficult people, we may be difficult people, but I wanna address this just because it's learning skills, learning curves, and being able to navigate life. And in life, there are difficult people. People who want their way, people who don't know how to communicate, people who are abusive with their words, people who aren't quite decisive and know what they want, and people who just plain want to be right. So anyways, difficult people sometimes is exactly what it sounds like, a challenge. They're people that we don't always know how to efficiently and properly communicate with. But for you to be able to interact and achieve goals with difficult people is a feat. It's an achievement, it's an accomplishment. So these are some of my tips that I thought about when I've ever had to deal with a difficult person and what has worked for me. So I brought my iPad here because I wanted to make sure that I was eloquent and articulate and very careful about the way that I communicated this tip, all right? So bear with me. Tip number one for how to deal with difficult people. You want to assess your role in the exchange. So it's very important to know going into the conversation what your objectives are. That way you can stay focused. That way you can maintain a direction in the conversation. So prior to engaging with the difficult person, if you know that they're difficult, you want to have an objective in mind. By the end of this conversation, here's what I want to have left with. This is the resolution I want to come to. This is what I want to gain once we're done here. And if you know that going into it, then usually you have a better sense of control in the exchange, okay? So that's tip number one. Assess your role in the exchange. Okay. Tip number two is set limits and boundaries. Whew. Now this is a loaded one, but it's so simple that we sometimes overlook it. I made a video about boundaries, but this is a everyday example of how to, before you even start your conversation, when you are laying your objectives down, also lay some of your boundaries down. So this is what is acceptable, you know? This is the way I want to speak to you, and this is the way we should, interact. And I think this will promote a healthy conversation and a healthy exchange. All right? And sometimes that will disarm people, or sometimes it may not, but either way, you set the boundary that we're not going to disrespect each other. We're not going to overtalk each other. I want to hear you. I want you to hear me. And by the end of this, hopefully we can either come to a compromise or just agree to disagree respectfully. So that's what number two is. Tip number two is set limits and boundaries. Tip number three, So most importantly, I know this is probably one of all of our least favorites. Listen and have an open mind. Usually 10 times out of 10, people want to be heard, and their communication style is indicative of that need. So they're going to communicate in a way based on if they feel heard or not. If they're more aggressive, more assertive, maybe even more abrasive in their speech, it's usually because they feel like they're not being heard, and that the only way to be heard is to overtalk and to be louder, or perhaps to be rude or to be brash. So you have to understand that they just want to be heard, and it's your duty to listen and even be open-minded, because going into a conversation, going into an exchange with a difficult person, you have to understand they may not have a goal, but because you have a goal, you still want to be able to listen objectively and be open-minded to what it is they have to say so that you can respond appropriately. Listening is such an important tool, because just as you want to be heard and you want your point to be communicated and to come across, they do too. And so that's only right for you to listen actively and have an open mind, okay? So that's tip number 3. So tip number 4, be solution oriented. This is going to be your best friend. So usually if you know that you're going to be engaging with a difficult person, like it's a meeting, it's a conversation you know has to happen, something that you guys have prearranged and you're anticipating already dealing with this difficult person, it's very important to come into the conversation solution oriented. So whatever the topic is at hand, whatever the decision that is that needs to be made, go ahead and already come to the table with some viable options. Yes, you're listening. Yes, you're open-minded. But if you already have some solutions that you can propose, that you can offer, then that directs the conversation from being less of an opinion match, being less of a I want to win, I get the last word, but we're solution oriented. At the end of the day, this exchange needs to yield some type of outcome. This exchange needs to yield some type of result. And so here's what I propose. I see that you feel like this. Here's what I'm hearing from you. I'm understanding that this is what you want, this is what you expect. Here's what I think will be a great solution to do that. How about we think about it from this perspective? You know, making sure that your speech, making sure that your perspective, making sure that the way you communicate is always based on a solution. We need to solve whatever the problem is. It's compromise, then we need to talk about it. If it's negotiation, then let's have that conversation. So don't go into it just shooting off your opinions and trying to get the last word and trying to be right and trying to convince the other person of what you want or trying to force them to comply with you. That's not what we want. At the end of the day, we want a viable solution, or we want to be able to agree to disagree. Either way, if you come to the table solution oriented, it keeps the main thing, and it keeps everyone focused as much as you possibly can. So, tip number 5, try your hardest not to judge. Compassion and empathy are some of God's greatest gifts, and that's for a reason. When we deal with any kind of person that's different than us, that's had a different life experience than us, it's so important that in order to connect and in order to comprehend and in order to have a greater understanding and even resolve problems, we have to have compassion. We have to be able to realize that whatever life experience has brought that person to this moment is playing out in this moment. So it is your duty, yes, to be a good steward to the conversation, but you also need to realize that sometimes it is less about you personally and more about whatever internal experiences or internal struggles they deal with. And so I'll say this is more sometimes in interpersonal relationships. When someone is projecting, or when someone is deflecting, or when someone is treating you wrong when you know you have not deserved it, it's usually not your fault. It usually has less to do with you, more to do with them. And when you understand that, you don't get frazzled, tensions don't have to rise, and you can maintain focus in the conversation. So this is so important. Try not to judge. Put your judgments to the side. This is also playing on tip number 4, listening and having an open mind. But remember to practice compassion and understand that they too have had life experiences that have brought him here. And that's probably what's playing out at this moment, okay? That's tip number 5. Finally, tip number 6, do not give what you get. I've always said this. How people do me is not an indication of how I need to do other people. Because while they may be spewing venom, that's not who I am, and that's not what I'm about. And so I'm not going to allow the conversation or allow my emotions to take me out of character and allow me to return anger with anger. That not only is destructive, but it's going to diminish your message. It's going to diminish the value of what it is you set out to do. So when I say do not give what you get, when you're dealing with a difficult person and they are being abrasive and abusive and assertive and aggressive and just extra, they're doing the most, stay calm, stay resolute, stay in character, and stay composed. And that way, you, at the end of the day, whether you guys agree to disagree, agree to de-escalate and walk away, or maybe you even negotiate and come to a compromise, you can say that you stood firm on what it is you believed in and you were not swayed to come out of your character. And not only will that make you feel good about yourself, but it may even help them to respect you even more and feel more comfortable in having further conversations if you need to, or future conversations if you need to. This is someone you work with, or someone you live with, a roommate, or just someone that you just happen to be in the same social circles. Being a person that remains composed and calm, cool, and collected in the face of adversity is such a play in the long run. It shows that you're not only calculating, you're not only strategic, but you're poised, and that you're graceful, and that you can handle whatever it is that they spew at you. And sometimes people will realize, hold up, I just did the most and I didn't need to do that. And the fact that they didn't come at me the same way I came at them, that means I need to check myself. And it may inspire them to do some work for themselves, okay? So that's tip number 6, is do not give what you get, okay? Anyways, thank you guys. That was my roundabout way, but I hope it helps just dealing with difficult people. I really feel like these tips, they're not just, one word kind of tips, but I hope that you were able to take some notes, think about this, listen to it a few times if you have someone in your life. But I've dealt with difficult people, and I realized you have to come to the table differently, and you have to rise to the occasion. It's not about necessarily putting the blame on them and putting the onus on them. You have to be able to navigate different situations in different atmospheres with different types of people and maintain your character and your integrity in those situations, okay? So have a great week. I can't wait to talk to y'all soon. Please, 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 I want to begin to feature cute designer cups. So if you know someone that does any type of arts and crafts with mugs, glasses, tumblers, please send them to me. I want to be able to incorporate that into my Sip and Tips. So nonetheless, have a great week. Talk to you later.